All right, so get ready because today we're diving deep into the world economy. Specifically, we're looking at the G20.
The G20.
Yeah, those big players that pretty much shape everything, right?
Exactly.
And we've got this super interesting article from Visual Capitalists to guide us.
Okay.
It's called Ranked, the World's 20 Largest Economies by GDP, PPP, published on December 10th, 2024, just a few weeks ago, so it's really up to date.
Right.
But here's the thing.
What's that?
This isn't your typical GDP list. We're talking about purchasing power parity, PPP.
Ah, yes. PPP. That definitely changes things.
So get ready for some surprises because things might not be what they seem.
Absolutely. Using PPP can really shift our perspective on economic power. It's not just about the raw numbers, how much a country produces.
Right.
It's about what that money can actually buy within its borders. The real cost of living,
Okay, so it's not just about the dollar signs. It's about what those dollars can get you.
Exactly.
If I got to ask, does that really shake things up that much? I mean, we all know the G7.
All right, the G7.
Those economic giants, they still seem to be calling a lot of the shots, don't they?
Well, yes and no. The G7 has definitely had a long reign. They emerged during that whole 1970s oil crisis.
Right. Yeah.
And they've wielded a lot of influence ever since.
Mm-hmm.
But the world's always changing, isn't it? Globalization has opened the door for the rise of the BRICS nations.
BRICS, okay.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And they're definitely changing the game.
So it's kind of like a power struggle happening on a global scale?
Yeah, you could say that. And the G20 is where all these players come together.
Ah, I see. So both the G7 and BRICS are part of this bigger G20 group.
Exactly. It's the top 20 economies in the world. And here's another interesting tidbit. The G20 actually has 19 member states.
Oh, really?
And then 2 regional organizations, the European Union and the African Union.
So they're all in the mix?
All in the mix. And together, they account for, get this, a whopping 70 to 85% of the entire world economy.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's massive.
Okay, so the G20 is a big deal.
Huge deal.
But this PPP thing, it still feels a little bit abstract, Does it really matter in the real world? Like, how does it actually affect things?
Oh, it definitely matters.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. Imagine you're planning a vacation, right?
Okay, sure.
And you see a hotel in another country that seems like a steal, way cheaper than what you'd pay back home.
Yeah, I've seen those deals.
But that doesn't necessarily mean everything is cheaper in that country, right?
Right.
PPP helps us understand that. It takes into account the relative cost of goods and services.
Oh, I see.
So you get a better idea of how far your money will actually go in that country.
So PPP gives us a more realistic picture of economic strength.
Exactly. It's not just about the raw numbers, but about the purchasing power those numbers represent.
Okay, so PPP is like a magnifying glass.
Kind of. It helps us see the details we might miss otherwise.
I like that. So what happens when we apply this PPP lens to the G20 rankings? Are there any big surprises?
Oh, you bet there are. For starters, China has held the top spot as the world's largest economy by PPP since 2014.
Whoa, hold on. China's on top.
On top, their PPP-adjusted GDP is significantly higher than the United States, even though the U.S. still leads in nominal GDP.
So China's #1 in terms of purchasing power.
Exactly.
That's definitely not the picture you usually get from the news headlines.
I know, right? It's fascinating how PPP can shift our understanding of economic power.
So what's driving this difference? Why does China have so much more purchasing power?
Well, a few things contribute to that. Their cost of living is lower compared to developed nations like the U.S.
Okay, that makes sense.
And their manufacturing capabilities are massive. They can produce goods much more affordably.
Right.
This means Chinese companies might have more resources to invest globally, which could even impact your industry.
That's something to think about.
It is. It's a whole different way of looking at things.
So even though China might not be the absolute richest in terms of pure dollars, their money stretches further, giving them a real edge.
Precisely. And this is just one example of how PPP reveals a whole other side to the global economic landscape.
I'm starting to see that.
Another fascinating case is India.
Oh, India. They're always being talked about as the next big economic power.
Right.
So where do they stand in this PPP ranking?
Get this. India has climbed all the way to 3rd place, and their PPP-adjusted GDP is almost 4 times larger than their nominal GDP.
4 times. That's incredible. What's fueling that kind of growth?
Well, a few things. First, their population size is a major factor. It's huge, which means a huge domestic market.
Makes sense.
And then you've got their booming tech sector. That's adding a ton of momentum.
So they've got this massive population that's becoming more and more prosperous, driving demand and innovation.
Exactly. They're hitting a sweet spot, that's for sure.
This is already making me rethink how I see the global economy.
It's pretty eye-opening, isn't it?
It is. But before we get too deep into the weeds, let's just recap what we've learned so far.
Okay.
We've seen how PPP shakes up the economic rankings, putting China at the top, and highlighting India's remarkable rise.
Right.
But we're also starting to uncover some of the limitations of PPP,
Absolutely. It's not a perfect measure.
which just adds another layer to this whole thing. I'm really starting to see how complex this all is.
It's definitely not simple. It's about understanding the whole picture, not just the headlines.
This is what I love about these deep dives, getting beyond the surface and really digging into the details.
Me too. There's always more to discover. And as we move forward, we'll delve even deeper into these complexities.
Ooh, can't wait.
We'll look at specific examples of how these economic forces are shaping industries, jobs, and even the products we use every day. So buckle up.
I'm ready for more.
It's amazing to see these big economic shifts actually play out in the real world.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, think about global trade.
Okay.
China's Belt and Road Initiative.
Right. A Belt and Road.
It's a perfect example.
Huge infrastructure projects all over Asia, Africa, Europe.
Exactly.
Massive
That's
investment.
like they're not just building roads and bridges.
Right.
It's more like building entire economic partnerships.
Yeah. And reshaping those global trade routes.
Yeah.
It's a bold move, for sure.
Bold, and it's definitely making some people nervous.
I bet. It kind of makes you wonder about their long-term game plan, you know?
It definitely raises questions.
But hey, China's not the only one making waves.
True, true.
India's tech sector is booming like crazy.
It really is.
They've become a major exporter of software and IT services.
Yeah, they're capturing a big chunk of that global market.
It's pretty amazing how India has transitioned from like an agricultural economy to a tech powerhouse.
It's remarkable.
I'm curious, what were some of the key things that allowed them to make that shift?
Well, one crucial factor has been their investment in education, building up that human capital.
Right, investing in their people.
Exactly. And they've really embraced globalization,
Smart move.
attracting foreign investment, integrating into those global supply chains.
So it's like a combination of strategic planning, skilled labor, and just being open to the global market.
Yeah, all of those things working together.
And that economic success, I mean, it's got to be translating into more political influence too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Both China and India are becoming more assertive on the world stage,
Makes sense. They're flexing their muscles a bit more.
challenging that traditional, Western-led order.
And we're seeing that play out in organizations like BRICS,
Right.
which is sort of like an alternative to those Western-dominated institutions.
like the G7.
Yeah. So is this the beginning of like a new era of multipolarity?
It's definitely a possibility. We're seeing a rebalancing of power.
Mm-hmm.
The BRICS nations are demanding a bigger say in global affairs.
Right. They want a seat at the table.
Exactly. And this shift is creating some interesting new dynamics.
Like what?
Well, like the growing competition between the U.S. and China
Oh, yeah.
for influence in places like Asia and Africa.
It's like a giant chess game, but with super high stakes.
High stakes indeed. And the outcome of this competition is going to have a massive impact on the whole world.
No pressure then.
Right. It's a good reminder that economics and geopolitics,
Yeah.
they're totally intertwined.
For sure.
Economic power often leads to more political leverage and vice versa.
Speaking of leverage, it's really striking how these economic shifts are changing those global supply chains.
Absolutely.
Like China's dominance in manufacturing.
Right.
It's given them a huge advantage in things like, electric vehicles.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They've got so much control over battery production and those rare earth minerals that are so essential for EVs.
Yeah, the control over key resources gives them a lot of bargaining power.
They're in the driver's seat.
And it goes way beyond electric vehicles, too.
Oh, I bet.
Smartphones, solar panels, pharmaceuticals.
Wow.
China's manufacturing muscle affects so many industries,
It's kind of mind-blowing.
affecting businesses and consumers all over the world.
So basically, even if we don't realize it, these global economic forces are shaping what we buy, what we use every day.
That's exactly it. It's
Yeah.
not just about who's making what. It's also about who's buying.
Oh, interesting.
India's middle class is growing so rapidly.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It's a massive new market that businesses are scrambling to tap into.
So it's like a two-way street. Countries are becoming more interconnected, more interdependent.
Exactly. That interdependence can lead to amazing things, collaboration, innovation, but it also creates vulnerabilities,
Right. Like what?
Well, we've seen it recently with those supply chain disruptions
Oh, yeah, all those problems.
caused by, geopolitical tensions, global events.
It's all connected.
It's a complex web for sure, and understanding these dynamics is crucial for navigating the global economy these days.
It's like you need a map and a compass.
Not a good guide. But seriously, it's not just about understanding the big picture.
Okay, what else is there?
It's about recognizing that these global forces
Yeah.
are impacting our lives in so many ways.
Right. It's not just theoretical.
From the jobs we have to the products we buy. It's personal.
Mm.
So as we dig deeper, I really want you to think about how these economic shifts are playing out in your own life.
That's a good challenge.
What connections are you making? What questions are coming up for you?
I like that. We're all learning here together.
Exactly. Your insights and perspectives matter.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
there's something you mentioned earlier that I think is really important.
What's that?
We tend to focus so much on GDP,
Right, GDP.
whether it's nominal or PPP adjusted like we've been talking about, but it feels like GDP only tells part of the story.
It does. It's a limited measure.
So what are some of the downsides of using GDP as the only yardstick?
Well, for one thing, GDP doesn't factor in things like income inequality,
Oh,
environmental sustainability, social progress.
so a country could have a high GDP, but if the wealth isn't shared fairly, or if it's achieved by destroying the environment,
Exactly.
is it really a success story?
That's the question. We need to look beyond just the numbers and consider the human impact of economic policies and trends.
So true.
Are people's lives actually getting better? Are they benefiting from economic growth? Are we building a sustainable future for the next generation?
Those are the real questions.
Absolutely. And as we head into the final part of our discussion,
Okay,
let's keep those broader questions in mind.
definitely.
It's not just about understanding the numbers.
Right.
It's about understanding what those numbers mean for people, for the planet, and for the future.
That's a perfect way to frame it. Let's dive into that final part. Okay, so we've talked about these big economic shifts, how
Yeah.
they're affecting everything, trade, geopolitics.
Uh-huh.
But let's get down to brass tacks here.
Okay.
How does all this actually affect me in my everyday life?
That's the key question, right?
Yeah,
It's easy for these global forces to feel abstract,
right.
distant, like they don't really matter to us personally. But the truth is, they have a very real impact on our lives.
Okay, I'm listening.
The products we use, the jobs we have, even the choices we make as consumers.
All right, give me an example.
Okay, sure.
Let's say I'm thinking about buying an electric car.
Electric car. Okay.
How do these economic trends play into that decision?
Well, we talked about China's dominance in battery production.
Right, and rare earth minerals.
Exactly.
They're like the kings of that stuff.
It gives them a huge advantage in the EV market.
Okay, so how does that affect me as a buyer?
Well, Chinese companies can produce EVs more affordably,
I see.
and they have the capacity to scale up production.
So could this actually make electric cars cheaper for people like me?
It's definitely possible.
So my dream of driving an electric car,
Yeah.
it might actually be thanks to China's economic power.
It's not as crazy as it sounds. And this dynamic, it's not limited to just cars.
Oh, really?
Think about smartphones,
Yeah.
solar panels, even the clothes you wear.
Wow.
Global economics are constantly shaping what's available, how much things cost, even how products are designed.
So these trends are kind of like a hidden hand guiding the whole global marketplace.
Exactly, a hidden hand that's always at work. And it's not just the products themselves.
What else then?
It also affects jobs and entire industries.
Oh, right, jobs. That's a big one.
Take India, for example.
Okay.
Their tech sector is exploding,
Yeah, we talked about that.
creating all kinds of new opportunities for software developers, engineers, entrepreneurs,
And not just in India, right?
all over the world.
So these shifts can create a ripple effect in the global job market.
Absolutely. Of course, not all the effects are positive.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
Some industries will face challenges as production moves to countries with lower costs or different regulations.
It's a tough reality for some businesses and workers,
It is. It's a constant need to adapt and evolve.
both for companies and individuals.
You got it.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to understand these global trends.
Okay, I'm with you.
By staying informed, we can anticipate changes, see the opportunities, make smarter choices.
about careers, investments, even just everyday purchases.
Exactly. It's like having a roadmap to navigate this complex global economy.
A roadmap, I like that.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with one last thought.
Okay, shoot.
The world is becoming increasingly interconnected,
Right? We've seen that.
interdependent. This has incredible potential, but it also comes with risks. It's up to all of us to engage with these complex issues.
So what can we do?
Think critically about our choices. Work towards a global economy that's more just, equitable, and sustainable.
Those are some big goals.
They are. But they're achievable if we work together. And remember, we're not just passive bystanders in all of this.
Right, we have a role to play.
We're active participants in shaping the world we want to live in.
That's a powerful message. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So as we go about our day, let's all think about those connections we're making to the global economy.
Yeah, great idea.
The products we use, the news we read, the conversations we have. How is all of this being shaped by these global forces?
It's a question worth asking ourselves.
It is, and it's something we'll keep exploring in future deep dives. Thanks for joining us on this one.